the teams I see struggle. They have 150 different objectives. They don't really know what they're working towards. Like, they're looking left and right. They're being asked for data like ad hoc. I notice a lot of people get fixated on the number. I was always really interested in the behaviours that deliver the number, because then the number just becomes an outcome of those behaviours.
Welcome back to another episode of the GS MedTech podcast, where I speak with industry leaders shaping the future of MedTech. I'm Damian Medarski, and my guest today is Ash Ross from the Change World, a MedTech industry veteran and a former leader at Medtronic, where he built and led high-performing teams. He now coaches senior executives on leadership, transitions, and team dynamics, helping them unlock performance through greater self-awareness and clarity. In this conversation, we discuss leadership transitions, the move from corporate to high-growth environments, and how culture and self-awareness often determine whether executives succeed or struggle. Ash, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Demi. Yeah, that's an amazing introduction. Yeah, no, I come from a background in MedTech, and nowadays I spend a lot of time working in a variety of different medical devices companies, but also spend a bit of time in fashion, recruitment to a certain extent, defense, big tobacco. It's an interesting world I now get to interact with at many levels in many different ways. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation.
And obviously for the purpose of this podcast and following my audience, I'll try to steer you towards MedTech conversations. You've led large teams and significant P&Ls in MedTech. What were the defining experiences that shaped your leadership philosophy?
There's a variety. Like I always think about the first time you become a leader. I always think that's a big transition when you go from being an individual contributor to suddenly having a team of people, and that moment of realization where not everybody works like you or not everybody interacts with you. I think that's a big sort of moment for me. And then the other bit is when you start to step outside of either your country or your region, and you get exposed to a variety of different international cultures, differences. Like, the world is a big place, but very quickly it becomes a lot smaller. And then those interactions, I think, were quite large. And always for me, it was when we got in new executive vice presidents that were coming in with different views, different directions. They were some sort of hard switches. So I think it's more like those experiential moments. And a lot of what I do now is work with people trying to unpick those experiential moments from a learning. Sometimes you don't really realize that it's a big learning point. But for me, they were the big ones, I think. Like, there's some huge wins to do with nice guidance, reimbursement, big restructuring programs, all of those types of things. But fundamentally, it's the personal experiences that I found as being the most sort of powerful or impactful moments for me.
Amazing. And while scanning your profile and your new business's website, at some point I've stumbled upon your mention of leadership being a custodian of the role.
Yes.
And for me, that's a very interesting mindset that I'm curious to know, where did it come from?
I remember reading a book on the All Blacks psychology. So the New Zealand rugby team, basically. It's called Legacy. It's a fantastic leadership book that I recommend to a lot of clients. And when an All Black gets their shirt, they also get a book of all the previous All Blacks that have worn that shirt. And there's a note from each of them that they move through. And I really liked the concept that effectively that you didn't own the shirt. You were just looking after it, and you were adding something to the next person that took over. And I think that's something I really notice, is that the leaders that think like that, like, move through. They're not sort of attached specifically to a role. They're thinking about what can I bring to this role? Like, what can I do? How can I leave this in a better place? And I love it. I absolutely love it. And it was always an interview question I like to ask, which at the end of it was kind of like, when you leave this job in 3 to 4 years' time, what do you want to look back on and be proud of? Like, what's the thing you want to sort of leave as part of it? And people would always be a bit shocked. Like, they're sort of sitting here going, you're already thinking about me leaving? And it's kind of like, yeah. Like, this isn't a job for life. Like, this is a job where you're doing something, you're learning something. There's a really great leader I work with, Imad Zafar, and he really talks about it as critical experiences. So it's almost like, what's the critical experience you're creating within yourself in that role? And then as you leave it, what's the thing you're leaving behind? And I think that's a really powerful way.
Nice. And you've already left the corporate world, so I can ask you, what are you most proud of passing on to the next generation of leaders?
Well, like, they're leaving the corporate bit. But MedTech's a fascinating one. One of the bits that I love about it is I you get to work in an industry where you touch thousands of lives. Like if you do your job right, you will change how healthcare systems work, how people are treated. The thing I love still to this day is I meet people with some of the products in that I used to sell or I had an impact on. I know exactly what it took to get them that, and they have no idea we did it. So that's like one of the things I love. And then the other bit is I've built teams, I've left those teams, I've seen them pulled apart. One of the big things this time around was I was really thinking about how do I build a team that stays? Like, how do I build and create teams that are fully sustainable, that have impact, organizations won't strip away? It's kind of like thinking with the sort of long term in mind and thinking about how do you demonstrate success? How do you demonstrate the impact that you can do, but in a really positive way? I notice a lot of people get fixated on the number, and I was always really interested in the behaviors that deliver the number, because the number just becomes an outcome of those behaviors. And I'm kind of hoping that's what I've left behind is like a set of behaviors, thought processes that I'm already seeing the people that have taken it on evolving and taking further, that then allows it to be sustainable. And that's where growth, for me, from a personal perspective, a team perspective, also from a numbers perspective, comes from, is that thought process around the behaviors, the approaches, the strategy, as opposed to I've got to hit this AOP. How do I just drop a load of big deals at the end of the quarter and try and hit it? That's not long term. Like it's very short.
I couldn't agree more with you. And that's kind of how we run guided solutions as well. No KPIs, no metrics, no commission as well to a very high degree. And it creates a completely different environment and collaboration and teamwork that you don't necessarily get to see in other companies where they're mainly driven by obviously the actual KPIs and the set of targets that are being maybe realistically or unrealistically given to them.
I don't think KPIs are bad. It's kind of thinking about what purpose do they serve? Do they enhance what you're trying to deliver? Are they something that help people focus on key activities, direction, strategy that sort of really help them think about it? Or is it something that you're just using to track and sort of use as a stick? And I think it's like thinking about it as either, is it something that empowers people and moves people forward and helps them stay focused on the objective? Or is it something that you're using to help with an internal presentation to justify an existence of something? Again, important, but it's how you use these tools and what's the motivation behind it, which I always see as the difference. And I get to work with loads of teams now. Like I work in the top 10 MedTech companies in the world now across a variety of different functions, and I love it. And the ones I've seen that do it really well think about KPIs and objectives of things that actually move people in the direction of something, that keep them on track. The ones that I see struggle are the ones that use it as an internal reporting metric. You can tell there's some that are customer focused. The KPIs are about changing the marketplace, helping the customer, those types of things. And then there's the ones that are internally focused, which is about keeping XCOM happy, like constant requests for data, those types of things. And that means you lose focus on your objectives. So I don't think they're bad. I just think about it as how you use it.
Do you feel like obviously leaders sometimes fail to see that, and maybe what are other hidden dynamics inside teams that they're failing to see whenever they're setting the strategy?
It's the motivation behind it. Like I always used to love the question, what has to be true for us to achieve this? Like I work a lot with companies that are restructuring, either integrating teams, taking teams apart. The ones that are doing it well are thinking, okay, what is it we're trying to achieve? They start from that place of like, what's the objective in the long term? What's the kinds of skills, the talents, those types of things that they need in place? Then they start thinking about the people. The opposite I see in some companies, which is where there's a lot of pressure that comes very quickly. You need to cut 15% of your bottom line. Let's get rid of headcount. Okay. Like, I know Dave, I know Sarah, I trust them. I'm not too sure about Sean. I don't know anything about these people over here. So suddenly they're thinking more from a personnel kind of perspective or a relationship perspective. It's kind of always that. It's kind of thinking, okay, what's the thing we're trying to achieve? What has to be true? Then it's kind of like fitting about, okay, to make those things that have to be true, what are the KPIs, the strategy, the structure that we build around it to deliver it? As a kid, I was obsessed with special forces. Like I used to read books on special forces all the time. And it's the thing that sort of stuck with me from then is that They're highly trained individuals, very skilled. A lot of money goes into their investment, but they set an objective and then they're dropped into a situation whereby they have to meet that objective, but all hell breaks loose. So you can't have a rigid, we're going to do this, this, and this. But what you need is a sort of set of goals, objectives, training capabilities that then allow them to make the right decisions in that moment and trust them to be able to do that. And I see that in the best teams, like in the sort of leaders that are truly thinking about, let's set a clear objective. Let's ensure that people have the skills that they have. Let's give them a framework to operate within. Let's build a nice accountability structure for what they're doing, but then we let them go. Like we let them figure it out. MedTech's a fascinating place. I get to work across so many industries and I'm really lucky to do that. But MedTech people are very bright, but they're also driven by purpose in a very different way to, like, if I'm working with big tobacco or if I'm working with finance, I work with some of the top banks in the world, the drivers are very different. And then that influences behavior. Good leaders recognize that and tap into it as they're setting that structure and those objectives. So yeah, there are some of the differences I see between different teams.
Yeah. So if you can summarize all of that, what did you do differently from a leadership perspective, building a team that influenced, let's say, the
yeah.
change?
So like when I was a leader, it started really early on. Like I started in pharmaceuticals, and when I first started in pharmaceuticals, I was really well trained, and then I was set free. And then it sort of shifted to, here's a script, say the script. If they say yes, they say this. I sat there and just went, I'm a bright lad. Like, you don't need to pay me this amount of money just to parrot out what you're saying. So like, and that stuck with me all the way through. So the bit for me was to really start to hire people on behaviours and really looking at their drivers. Apparently being interviewed by me was like I was looking into the depths of people's souls, is what I was told. I didn't think it was that tough, but the feedback I've had since I've left is like, you really got into who I was and what I was about. I think it's thinking about that. It's always thinking about, like, what are the behaviors, the drivers of these people? Are they problem solvers, or are they people that just follow a direction, knowing what you want on the back of it? And then for me as a leader, it was always about building a framework. So it's kind of thinking about what's the clear objective, like then what are the sort of pillars that sit underneath that, what we're trying to achieve? How do I build accountability structures that keep them on track? And then how do I remove their barriers, either their internal personal barriers or their external pieces, so that they can just go after it? I had a boss when I first started in MedTech that said, if you're not in sales, you're in sales support. And that's the same for leaders. They are in support of their sales team. The people that are in the field delivering with customers, everything should be about trying to make them as good as possible. And the other bit is making it fun. Like, it's gamifying it. We used to have a lot of fun with competition. We would always be looking at how can we disrupt competitive launches. We used to think about what's the one or two questions that we would get a customer to ask a rep as soon as they're walking through the door with their new product that would suddenly demotivate them. Like, you can gamify it and then you celebrate success. So yeah, they're the types of things I used to like to do. And it's now in the work I do, I think fundamentally work is quite simple. We have an objective, we have some tasks to go after. It's sort of like the human element that can sometimes disrupt it. So it's like what's going on within ourselves. So very much myself as a leader, like, I have a fear of rejection. That's my stuff. So every time when I first started, I'd walk into a meeting, a presentation, like, oh, these people don't like me, or are they going to like me, all this sort of stuff. So I had to work on that and realize that it's not there. And I see varieties of that in everybody I work with. It doesn't matter if you're an individual contributor or an executive vice president. And then the other stuff is how teams interact. So like, what's the dynamic? You and I are now talking. We're talking consciously, but we're also talking unconsciously. And sometimes what leaders forget is that there's an unconscious communication going on within their team. There's patterns of behaviors that are systemically influencing what's going on. We have a habit of thinking it's this person or that person, whereas actually it's a product of the sort of relationship dynamics. So like, now what I try to look at is those types of things and go, how do we work with that? Because that's how you enhance. And it's, once you understand that, then work becomes simple again, because it's about the task, working with the individuals and getting the best out of them. These are bright people. It's kind of like we pay them a lot of money, or I used to pay them a lot of money. Now, some of them may disagree with that, and they may have even come to talk to you guys about it as well when they were looking for more.
No doubt.
But it's kind of, it's thinking like, they're bright, they're well paid. Set them free. Like, they can solve the problems that are in front of them very capably.
Yeah. So a couple of things that you've mentioned, and I'm very curious how you then put all of this together, because different people, different motivations, different characters, different fears. How do you then intentionally shape that team environment so people can actually perform at their best? working within a team?
There's a few different ways. Psychological safety is like a bit of a buzzword. And I listen to people talk about psychological safety sometimes, and they talk about it in a sort of Zen kind of, oh, it's a happy place. Truly psychologically safe team, you walk into it, you've got no idea who's in charge because there's so much challenge, there's pushback on it. And that's really thinking about your behavior as a leader. Do you invite challenge? Do you give people learning opportunities to develop as they go through? Are you allowing people to make mistakes? Like some of the stuff we used to celebrate was mistakes. I can remember one member of my team took 2 weeks to come and tell me once that we'd lost a big contract. And I knew 2 weeks before that we'd lost it. And I knew it happened and everything. I was just waiting for her to come. And she braced herself and she sat there and she talked to me. And my question was, what did we learn going through that process? Like, what have we noticed here? Okay, how do we apply that into other areas? So you create a learning environment from the mistake. I see in some companies where they're trying to motivate people to take risk, but it has to be the right risk and it has to pay off. Because if you take a risk and get it wrong, then heaven forbid, like you're going to come down on it. And I think that's one of the biggest pieces. The other bit is to just understand the dynamics between people. Like we do a lot of work now where we help people understand like the different profiles within a team, really starting to understand the difference in what the team actually needs. Like there's some very simple questions. Like what does this team want to be known for? What do you want the culture to be? How do you want to be when things get difficult? Super, super simple questions. Normally, most leaders will do it in some version. It'll be like trust, fun. But those two words to me and you could mean the same. They can mean something very different. So it's getting clear on that. And that's anchoring to a very clear vision. So it's kind of the teams that I see that do this well, they create a vision, they use that as a filter for the decisions they make, and they focus down on it. The teams I see struggle, they have 150 different objectives. They don't really know what they're working towards. Like they're looking left and right. They're being asked for data like ad hoc, so they don't have very good operating mechanisms. All of those sort of simple things make a difference because it allows people to know, A, they can be themselves in a certain environment and that's accepted. They know they can make mistakes. They know what's expected of them. They know the time frames when they're actually going to be asked for certain things so they can get on with their job. They know they're trusted and empowered to do it. I think the other things is also just accepting the differences that we have. Like a colleague of mine, she's very comfortable with me talking about this, is recognizing what happens with people. I remember one of my team had a performance issue and it was cyclical. And I can remember as a leader just sitting there saying, I'm noticing a cyclical pattern. And she turned around and went, I've never thought of it like that. And we wrapped support around that. So she had something called premenstrual dysphagia syndrome. And we got support in, we put that all in place. I'm not saying leaders should talk about this all the time, but it was a space that allowed her to be able to say, look, this is me, this is something I struggle with. And then we were able to create support, and then we made adaptations on the back of it. So it's about an inclusive environment as well. And there's a variety of different ways to create inclusivity. We think diversity is about diversity of gender, diversity of age, diversity of skin color. It's not. I've walked into teams where they have that, but they have a leader that's very direct, very dictatorial. So all you get is a homogenous thought process because what you haven't created is an environment that allows for a variety of thought. So that's also a crucial bit. Like, are you inviting different thought? Are you allowing those things to happen? Some do, some don't. Some look at diversity as I must have this range of people of different varieties. Whereas actually it's about having that variety, but then also harnessing the different thought processes that come with that and inviting that difference with healthy challenge and healthy conflict.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, and definitely could see it within some companies that we're collaborating with, and the clashes actually leadership makes.
You must have a fascinating insight because, like, you must see the people that teams want to go towards, and you must see the teams that people want to flood out of.
Yeah, we hear it a lot sooner than companies do in terms of the challenges that sometimes leadership is posting. And as you rightly point out, we start getting candidates from companies where people are just fed up with the inefficiencies of leadership, and they're just deciding that there is no way for that to change. So they're choosing a different business where they maybe feel a little bit more comfortable, a better environment.
The other thing leaders can do in that scenario is to think about change. What I notice quite a lot is that senior leadership teams, like the executive levels, they'll spend a lot of time thinking about new ideas. Bring in BCG, they'll bring in McKinsey, they'll bring in ZF, they'll bring in Bain, lovely deck, and then they go push it out to the team. This is what we want you to go do. What they don't realize in that moment is that they're asking people to change their strategies for success. MedTech is going through a huge transformation right now. You've got something that was very much service-based. It was kind of turn up to the case, you're supporting the customer, you have a great relationship. Like basically, I'd be the customer's friend. I'm there. I get them what they want. The customer is the decision maker. MedTech's changed. Like we're now in an environment where you have multiple stakeholders. You have to be more commercially astute, and companies are trying to shift towards this more commercially led piece. What they forget is those people have built live strategies for success all around that. So what you're actually asking somebody to do is completely change their way of working, their life structure, their strategies for success. That brings up all sorts of different things around resistance. And the good leaders understand that and know how to work with that. It's just psychology. Like every time you go through a change process, it triggers anxiety and grief. Grieve what you're losing. You're anxious about what's coming. You worry about your status, like within it. You worry about are you going to be seen as competent? Are you going to lose your autonomy? Can you actually relate to what's going on? Once leaders understand that, they can work with it, as opposed to maybe doubling down on, no, we don't say anything negative about this. This is positive. This is great. Let's push forward. And Dave and Sarah, you're the problem. We'll push you out the door. And it's kind of like for leaders to be successful in that, the ones I see do really well understand the psychology of change, not just the process of change.
Yeah, I'm more thinking about the behavioral rather than the strategic.
Yeah, like the strategy is key, but it's the behavioral piece that will actually allow you to execute it.
Yeah. And would you suggest to those leaders still utilize BCG and the likes, but then think about implementation stage? And if you're using an advisor to create that strategy for you, why not use an advisor to help you to implement it in the right way as well?
My whole business is around that, so I'd say yes, definitely. And if you need to come, like, get in touch with the change work, and we'll help you do it. But it's something like I can't remember the exact stat. It's on my website somewhere, but it's 23% of, I believe it's there was a Forbes article or a Harvard Business Review article where they're basically looking at 23% of those sort of consultancy-led processes get implemented. And most of those projects that I used to work on would be $500,000, $750K, 1.2 mil. It's a lot of money to invest. Then what you notice is then you deliver it, and then in the room you get the people just resisting it. And it's knowing how to work with that resistance. So you can bring someone in like me or the team that works with me to help you with it. The other thing is you can educate yourself around it. Like there are some very good psychological frameworks that you can use that sort of then help you understand what's going on. Once you understand the framework, you just literally go through a process. Like all humans' internal experience is unique, but we follow a fairly set group of behavioral patterns. And once you start to understand those behavioral patterns, you can work with them, and it makes a bit of a difference. I'm not saying I'm perfect. There'll be some people in my past that will definitely say I was not good enough at recognizing those behavioral patterns, but it's understanding it and then working with it and then building on it and then learning and iterating as you go.
And it makes sense, to be honest. No one's perfect from the get-go, but if you accept the fact that you learn from your experiences and then you build on them, you become better at what you're doing. That's for sure.
And what most people want is they want some kind of control over what's going on. They want some kind of autonomy to be able to understand, like to be able to make decisions around it. They want to relate to the change. Like I was working with a team recently, and the CEO became a big, well-recognized medtech company, and I was working with their senior directors on an international level, and they were having to make cuts. And the CEO just sat there and just sort of said, I know this is tough, but what this is about is I want to invest in developing this technology, the thing that you've been asking for. So if we can achieve this, then effectively I will promise you that I'll be able to deliver you this. They could relate to it, and it started to give them control. And he was saying, what I need you guys to sort of work through this and give me ideas and directions. It gave them autonomy over it. Suddenly, the room went from being like, oh my goodness, we've got to make cuts, to, wow, how do we make this happen? Because the thing that we're working towards, I can relate to that. So it makes a huge difference.
Amazing. So one other thing that we frequently see nowadays that I'm curious about it from your perspective is lots of senior executives from large corporates that are very successful assume they can translate that into smaller businesses. And maybe you've seen similar transition as well. So how true is the change and the success in changing from a big corporate to a smaller business?
It all depends on mindset. So the bit that I've experienced it myself, like I've been from big corporates to small businesses, back into big corporates. And in the big corporate, it's high pressure, it's high stakes, and it's the same in the smaller businesses, but you have a large support network that works with you. You normally have larger budgets. So your skill sets and your strategies around that are utilizing all of those tools at your disposal. You are used to working within a large, most probably matrix structured organization. So you're used to being able to do that. Suddenly go into a small company, I remember when I stepped into a smaller company, I was the marketing director the day before for Western Europe, the day before a conference. I had to go to IKEA, buy furniture, build it to build the stand, and then I had to paint the things with a roller. So I had to go to Wix to get the paint to paint the back of the shelves to make our stand unit. 2 weeks before, I was sitting in a P&L meeting no, it wasn't 2 weeks before. I had 3 months notice. But before, I was in Monterey in a very nice hotel. I'd been chauffeur driven from the airport. I'd walked in. Someone else had prepared my slide deck, and I was then presenting. Huge change. And for some people, they can adapt to that. And for some people, it's a bit of a culture shock, because what they're doing is they're looking around and going, where's my support network? Where's this? No, that isn't my job. I don't know how to do that. So it takes a mindset shift in relation to it. Building new strategies.
They need to unlearn conveniences.
It's almost like just develop new strategies. It's any change process. So I see it when individual contributors go to leaders. What made them successful as an individual contributor actually can get in the way of them being a good leader. But it's a strategy they've developed. And most strategies we develop for success are unconscious, and they're related to earlier childhood experiences. And then we translate that into, and it drives us to be successful. And it'll be related to our internal narratives that we tell ourselves either consciously or unconsciously. And it's the same in these scenarios. So all we've done is we've built strategies for success. And when we're dropped into a new situation, we try and pull on those old strategies. They don't work. And it creates internal tension, because we're going, well, this used to work and it's now not working and I don't know what to do. And a lot of it's about that conscious piece around going, okay, I need to develop a new strategy. What's the new strategy I need to do? What's the things I need to let go of that allow me to then develop that new strategy? And it's the same for any new situation.
Yeah. So it's almost the challenge is not capability, but more identity of who they believe they are as a leader.
Yes, very much so. It's the other scenario where I see it happen a lot is where someone's grown up in a specific healthcare sort of environment. So let's say they've always been in neuromodulation, and then suddenly they're switching to cardiac. So most people, I know I've worked with people an executive VP level in that scenario, right? And even from sort of frontline managers all the way up, I see the same pattern. And what they have is validation from their knowledge of the project, the disease area, the relationship with the customers. What we normally start to do in a coaching scenario is actually start to think about, okay, what were the thought processes? What were the behavioral pieces that translate across? And that's the bit, it's starting to recognize that actually you have certain thought processes, certain behaviors that actually utilizing those or adapting those into different strategies will continue to make you successful. And that's the new sort of strategy piece that you're developing, but based on the skills that you have, but you may not have realized because it was wrapped up in, actually, I know everything about neuromodulation and I've got great relationships and off we go. But actually, you're a really good business person because this, and this. And that's what I see working across so many different companies, operating units, even in different industries. I know we're on MedTech here, but you see the same patterns. You see the same needs, the same directions, and then it's understanding how to work with those patterns and the people underneath it.
So what are the early warning signs that an executive is struggling in a new role or in an established role, even if performance looks fine on the surface? How can they recognize that they're struggling and potentially seek help?
Yeah, and it's not, the stuff we do isn't just about struggle. It's about enhancement and acceleration, and there's ways in which you can sort of think differently to accelerate performance. But the bit that you sort of notice is the internal tension. So it's when your thoughts are starting to dominate. Like when you start to lose sleep, when you're starting to sacrifice things that used to be important to you, when the self-doubt is starting to appear in scenarios where you don't necessarily have that, when you're trying to portray something that you're not. Like I see that a lot. Like a lot of people start to create a persona that they believe they should be as opposed to who they actually are. All of those elements that sort of start to come in. If you notice that you're the other bit is also be really aware of your stress behaviors. Some people under stress pull back. Some people under stress double down. I definitely have leaders that vanished, and I definitely have had leaders that have sort of increased the tension and they want more data, more information, all of this sort of stuff. Like they're trying to gain more control. So, and all that is a threat response. And the bit for us to that people need to really recognize is that when we go into a stress or a threat state, our focus narrows, our cognitive ability becomes less, which is an evolutionary thing, because in a stressful, threatening scenario, we need to focus on the threat. We don't need distraction. So it's the brain's way of allowing us to hyper focus. But what happens when people are in that sustained sort of state, they won't be able to process information in the same kind of way. The other bit is also worth considering is, like I do a lot of work in sort of hormonal areas, both with men and women, is that we can also have physiological changes at different stages. I notice a lot of executives make a shift around their 40s. For men and women, that's when their hormones are crashing. And it changes how we think, how we process all of those different types of activities as well. So there's a behavioral element to it. It's worth recognizing what's driving that behavioral piece. But there's also another element to think, okay, is there any physiological shifts that are also creating a challenge in this environment?
Do you feel like coaching genuinely can turn around a difficult transition, or is it sometimes about helping someone realize it's just not the right fit?
It's both. It's working. A lot of what we're doing from a coaching perspective with individuals and teams is really working out what people want and what's important to them. It's helping them understand their drivers, their values, like both individuals and teams. And then it's recognizing the stuff that gets in the way. You and I both have stuff. I'm not going to get you to say what your stuff is, but you have the stuff that creeps in that sort of has a narrative. Everybody has it. If someone says they don't have it, they still have it, unless they sit within the triad, which is narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. But we all have something, and it's learning to work with that. So the example I gave earlier, mine is an abandonment and rejection issue, which then meant in every meeting, I thought that these people had to like me and that I had to get it right. The stress levels were super high. I'd get super hot, really sweaty, all of those types of things. I had to work with that stuff. It's still with me now. It's always here with me, but it's not something that I'm getting rid of. It's something I accept about myself. And the good leaders I see are the ones that do that, because those thought processes are the things that drive them for success, that push them to overcome sort of things. But sometimes they're the things that can derail us. So in coaching, we're trying to work with some of those sort of blocks that come up as well and give people strategies to overcome it. And then a lot of it's about thinking about situations in a different way. We see as coaches, see a lot of binary thinking. It's either this or it's this. And what we're trying to actually do is open up the thought processes, open up the perspectives around the situation, think about things in a different type of way. And that's the same for teams. Like we do it a lot with teams. I can remember working with a product development team, had every possible function, and you'd watch them all go head down when the other person was someone else in a different function was talking. It's like, not my job, I'm not going to be in this. And actually, once they started thinking about what's our shared experience, what's the thing we're working towards, the conversation and the support suddenly went up. And then the productivity comes up and then the output goes up, because they're not thinking in, this is my function, this is not my function. They're thinking about a different. So again, you're removing that binary thinking, which exists in a lot of places. It's a very human thing to do.
So would you say behavioral patterns and maybe cognitive biases quietly undermine as well?
You see that a lot. So under stress, like cognitive bias becomes a huge part of it. So I see it a lot in restructuring. We have a lot of familiarity bias. We have a lot of proximity bias. So familiarity bias is, they look like me, they sound like me, like I know them, I can relate to them. So we've got the same upbringing. Like, how many leaders do you see hire in and suddenly they come from one company and then suddenly the whole team underneath them come from the same company? And it's like, that's familiarity bias. And then the other piece I see, which is a real challenge in international teams. So lots of MedTech companies are now going from a regional structure to an international structure. There is mutterings that some companies are now starting to go back to a regional structure. It seems to be an 8 to 12 year cycle. Proximity bias is a real challenge in that. Like I noticed, particularly with the big American companies, the people that are closest to them in the office are the ones that they're making decisions with, choosing to be with. The person that's operating in Europe, Asia, Australasia, they're not getting the same sort of proximity influence. So the proximity bias kicks in. So we have to sort of recognize what our cognitive biases are. They will show up in a variety of ways. They show up in interviews, they show up in decision-making processes. There's situations where it's even noticing your own stuff, like your own values, like the things that trigger emotional responses to certain situations. Some people will set that off within you. So from a psychodynamic perspective, I will remind you of people in your past and the way in which I talk, the way in which I behave. You'll project all of those experiences onto me in this moment. And the same for you. Like I'll have all sorts of assumptions and beliefs around just because of how you look, how you talk, some of the information you've already told me. They're not true, but I'm projecting that onto you. And sometimes we need to be aware of that. The other thing that can hit leaders in these scenarios is how they respond to the projections of the people in front of them. They may start acting up to those projections, and being aware of that can be really important.
Yeah.
So lots of things from a behavioral perspective going on.
Very insightful, and my brain is already thinking and going back in experiences and understanding a lot more. So I very much appreciate that. And you've mentioned obviously coaching both individuals and teams as well. And I appreciate, I might be asking you to generalize, but when a leader finishes working with you, what has fundamentally changed in how they think, behave, and lead for you to say this was a successful, obviously, session and potential project?
I think so from an individual perspective, fundamentally what we're trying to do is raise self-awareness. So it's kind of like most of us create a life around should. So like I hear a lot of people talking about, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. And what we actually do is forget the things about who we actually are and what's important to us. So because we create a life around what everybody else wants, what our boss wants, like what we were told we should do when we were kids, all these types of things. And what I'm trying to always do is surface what's important to them, like get them familiar with their values, the directions they're going in. Then what I'm trying to do, and some of the people that work with my company do as well, is we're trying to really help them understand where they get in the way of themselves. So like what are the beliefs that come up in certain situations, challenges, directions, and then helping them work with those, and so that they're getting to a point where they have different outcomes in different sort of situations. Then what that allows us to do is open up their thought process. So it's about shifting from that either or thought process to actually a thought process of possibility. So then they're going after that. So normally what we see is that you see people having a greater level of self-awareness, greater level of resilience in sort of stressful scenarios, greater level of creative thinking, greater level of sort of interaction with others, greater level of progression in the direction that they want to go in. So it's normally coming from a greater level of confidence. And then the same with teams. Like teams that we normally work with will go in, they could be in high conflict, or they could be stagnating, or they could just be sort of pottering along. They could be quite disjointed. There could be sort of challenges with execution in relation to change processes. The same. So what we normally see is greater level of understanding, greater level of understanding of the things that get in the way, greater understanding of what needs to be achieved, better levels of cohesion, better ability to overcome some of the challenges that come in front of them, higher levels of execution, greater acceleration in execution of change processes and acceptance of those. We've seen more successful change processes as well as we go throughout that. But fundamentally, what we're always trying to do, either on the individual or the team basis, is to give them strategies and structures so they don't need us. The client for me that I don't want is the one that needs me for 5 years. It's like the client, ideally, if you work with me for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, you may come back to me intermittently to work through stuff, but you leave as a team or as an individual with a set of tools that allow you to overcome stuff in the future and then build you to the direction you want to go. So that's what we're fundamentally trying to do.
And I think you are speaking in some of the materials that I've already seen almost about small insights rather than big breakthroughs.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's what you're referring to, basically just understanding and moving along rather than significant changes.
Everything is information. So Either information about yourself, information about others. And a lot of the times we're not really then using that as information to help us make a decision. Like, all we need to be doing is gathering information, making a decision on the back of that information in a conscious way. Like, we're making conscious choices. I speak to teams a lot at the moment about growth numbers, and people are really upset about growth numbers. It's a contract. You work for a company pays you money, they give you a target. You have a conscious choice whether or not to stay with that company to go after that and take the salary, or to stop taking the salary and go find something that aligns to you more better. That's the simplest example of a conscious choice. But you also have the conscious choice on how you react in certain situations. Like, stress and anxiety and those types of things is built on how we react to a situation. It's not the situation itself that causes it, it's our reaction to that situation that causes it. There's a lot of stuff around mindfulness, breath work, all of that. That's about regulation and giving us space. The key bit is then to understand, okay, how am I choosing to react in this moment? What is the piece that's driving it? What do I need to think differently to allow me to then be able to shift in the direction that I want to go in? And once we can do that, like, things become a lot easier. Tougher decisions becomes just decisions.
Yeah. Amazing. Ash, I wish I had a lot more time, but
I'll come back.
Very, very insightful, and definitely I would want you to come back because there is so much more we can discuss. But for anyone that listened and enjoyed this conversation, I'll leave your contact details at the bottom of the podcast as well. And I very much appreciate your time.
Yeah, people drop in with me for 30-minute conversations all the time. I don't charge people for that. Like, I love just chatting to people. So if anyone's listening to this and just wants to have a chat, like, drop in and have a chat. Like, it won't cost them anything, because I just enjoy good conversations. Yeah,
amazing. That's very kind.